Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnanam Jana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. That as we are going to be reciting these verses throughout our lives every morning, at least every morning, you might as well learn the simple difference between A and A, E and E, U and U. It makes a lot of difference. Just like, for instance, the devotees regularly sing Dalita Hiranyakashipu, which means that he's been converted. He had a sex change operation and became a female.
Rupa also.
Rupa, Narahari Rupa, that becomes a female. You have a similar in Russian? The gender changes by the length of the... No. What I will speak on this verse is built around something written by one of my disciples. He had related to me, his name is Pati Pavandas. He related to me about, I asked him about his experiences in studying Bhakti Shastra in Mayapur, and I asked to see some of his work, and his reply he gave to one writing assignment, I found it to be good. So those of you who are familiar with this section of Bhagavatam will know that this describes, well, this particular verse describes how Brahma is desirous to create the world but finds himself unknowledgeable about how to do so.
Творить материальный мир, не знает, что ему делать.
How many of you know or have some idea what an idli is? Those of you who have been in South India. It's how to describe. It's what does it look like? It's a small cake, except that it's salty, made from ground rice and dal, usually urad dal, or often urad dal.
Такая лепешка.
So if I asked you to make some idlis, well, the first thing you have to do is to find out how to make them. And you have to ask someone who knows how to make them, how to make them. So Brahma has created the universe.
Brahma.
But because he hasn't created it yet, there's no one to ask. So not only did he know what to do, but he didn't even know how to find out what to do. So as we'll find out in the following verse, he received a Akash Vani, or the sound, he heard the sound, Tampa, which means that he instructed him to perform austerity. In this purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, if anyone desires to seek perfect knowledge of everything, he must seek the mercy of the Lord, and there is no other means. To seek knowledge on the strength of one's personal attempt is a sheer waste of time. So when Brahma performed austerities, it wasn't exactly that he was trying to get some strength to do the job. Demons perform austerities in order to gain strength for themselves. Devotees perform austerities to invoke the mercy of the Lord. We are fully, the devotee understands you are fully dependent on the mercy of Krishna. So someone may say, okay, well, we'll wait for the mercy. But Krishna has also given many processes to invoke his mercy, to show that we are serious to attract his merciful glance. So one of these processes is austerity. Although it should be understood that austerity in and of itself doesn't please Krishna. But if performed for the sake of pleasing him, then it does please him. Now you may say, well, why perform austerity? How does that please Krishna? Krishna says, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam Yome Bhaktya Prayachati Tadaham Bhakti Pahritam Ashnami Paritavanaha. If one offers me a leaf, flower, fruit or water, in devotion, following the proper processes, then I will accept it. So in one sense there's no need to perform austerities at all. As Narad informs us, Aradito yadi haristapasaktatam, Naradito yadi haristapasaktatam. If one is worshipping Krishna, then what's the point of performing austerities? And if one is not worshipping Krishna, then what's the point of performing austerities? However, we see that Brahma and many others perform austerities. Even Narayan Rishi, who is the Supreme Lord himself, comes to demonstrate how to perform austerities. So we can understand from this that although performing austerity in and of itself is not what pleases the Lord, but it has an important role. As Rishabdev says, and Srila Prabhupada often quoted, that Tapo Divyam Putraka Yena Sat from Shuddhyad Yasman Brahma Sokyam Tvanantam, that we should perform divine austerities by which we can attain the divine position of eternal bliss. Nayang deho deya bhajan mriloke kashtan kaman arhate virbhujam. That's how that verse begins, which I just quoted the last two lines of, which states that one should not lead one's life as do the stool-eating animals, simply looking for sense gratification. So divine austerities, they show our determining our commitment to come out of the life of sense gratification and to fully surrender to Krishna. In this Kali Yuga, severe austerities are not prescribed or even recommended. But on the other hand, it's not that there are no rules and regulations. Even to follow very basic and simple rules and regulations of bhakti for many people in Kali Yuga seems to be great austerity. Now, getting to Pratipadan's comments. When we hear about Brahma, born from a lotus stem, the lotus stem is coming from the navel of Mahavishnu, we might doubt it, due to our being raised with a so-called education, which leads us not to believe in such poppycock, as it would be called. Why should we believe it? If you look through our telescopes, we won't find any Brahma. So in this way, doubts may arise, but such doubts won't help us. They will hinder us in our understanding of Vedic knowledge. Definitely faith is required. Faith based on the understanding that anyway our sensual, mental and intellectual apparatus is extremely limited. So although we do approach the Vedic literatures in a manner to try to understand them with our intelligence, at the same time we understand that our intelligence is extremely limited. So the whole Vedic process is to hear from Vedic literatures and to be guided in that study. A purely academic approach will not help us. We have to study from devotees. We have to hear from those who have heard in disciplic succession and who are fixed in that understanding. It requires some faith, but everything requires some faith. Most people live their lives in the faith that we can enjoy this world. So one very good reason to have faith in the Vedic understanding is that from the beginning, the Vedic understanding tells us that this world is not a place of enjoyment. We can go through our whole life studying various subjects, but no one will tell us this. Even so-called religious teachers, they give us the idea that, well, God made this world for us to enjoy, and then if we, And what's going on. And if we worship God, then He'll give us permanent enjoyment. They have some idea of heaven as some place where you enjoy sense gratification without having to go to work and pay tax and all these kind of things. So those who are somewhat spiritually awakened, they can recognize that from the outset, the spiritual knowledge of the Vedas, it tells us the real truth. So this doubtful, skeptical mentality which is instilled into us by the so-called scientific form of education is a complete obstacle in our approaching Vedic knowledge. On the other hand, over-credulity is also an obstacle, or can be an obstacle. In India today, probably the most prominent strand of Hinduism is the worship of Sai Baba, the Muslim fakir Sai Baba. Not really a group. It's a strand, genre, you can say. There's no sampradaya. Genre? Well, you say group, it gives the idea that there's some sampradaya, some organization, which there isn't. Anyway, there's not that anymore. Which is just nonsense. Which has nothing to do with Vedic knowledge or directions. So the Vedic knowledge is presented to our intelligence, but at the same time with the understanding that our intelligence needs to be guided. Sometimes we hear, or quite often we hear that, well, spiritual life means to know yourself, to withdraw and find yourself within. But actually we require to be guided. We require ourselves to be guided. Without proper guidance, if we simply try to find our own self, we'll find the present manifestation of our false egoism. Which is why most people, when they search for their self within, they find, oh, I found myself, I'm God. Which is nonsense. And why philosophies which tell people, well, actually you're God, they're very popular. Yes, I knew it. But if you're God, then why do you need someone else to tell you that you are God? There's so many wrong ideas. So we require guidance to understand who we actually are. Now Brahma was in a situation where there was no one visible to help him. So he sought the mercy of the Lord. Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye. The Vedic knowledge, Brahma, was imparted into the heart of the original intellectual by him, namely Vasudeva, Krishna. As Srila Prabhupada writes in this purport, all this knowledge was fully achieved by him, Brahma, through the medium of Bhakti Yoga. So how we have to perform Bhakti Yoga in our present circumstances, of course, quite different in its external methodology to that of Brahma. In the modern age, the most important processes, as I quoted last night from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, are Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan Bhagavat Shravan, Mathura Vas Shraddhai Shrimurtir Shevan. Associating with devotees, hearing about Krishna, before that comes chanting the names of Krishna, then hearing about Krishna, residing in Mathura and faithfully worshipping the deity. But the attitude is the same within all devotees. Within Srila Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there are examples given of devotees who achieve perfection by following various of the 9 processes of devotional service. Parikshit, he attained perfection by hearing. And Shubadev by chanting, Prahlad by remembrance, and so on. But the essence of the attitude is the same in all of them, that of submission, loving submission to Krishna. So Brahma, he invoked the mercy of the Lord by tapasya, austerity. In the purport to the next verse, Srila Prabhupada writes as follows: by tapasya only one can get the profit of human life, and not by a polished civilization of animal life. I think you can just translate it.
Yeah.
By tapasya only can one get the profit of human life. In the meantime, I'm trying to find it. And not by a polished civilization of animal life. It's at the end of the first paragraph. Now, the animal does not know anything except sense gratification in the jurisdiction of eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy. But the human being is meant to undergo tapasya, or going back to God, back to home. So tapasya is the antithesis of the modern way of life, which may make it more difficult for us who are raised in the consciousness of eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy. When we talk about Russian culture, or American culture, or French culture, well, the essence is eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy. Srila Prabhupada uses the term polished civilization. So we may have very sophisticated persons such as Tolstoy, Tchaikovsky, who else? Mendeleev.
Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
No, I'm talking about Russians. So they may be very sophisticated, but if you get to the bottom of it all, they don't know anything beyond eating, drinking, mating, and family. He was a great yogi. Tolstoy was a great yogi.
No, he was familiar with Krishna. He wrote some...
He had some familiarity.
Yeah.
He was more polished.
Well,
that's a very good example, actually, because even if people get some knowledge of these things, because they're not properly guided, they still remain basically in the consciousness of trying to enjoy this world.
То все равно, так сказать, он остается, его сознание остается материальным.
It's very difficult, having been raised in a culture in which we don't have knowledge of this spiritual existence, to change our life to be focused on attaining that. At the most, persons who don't have knowledge of genuine spiritual existence in service to Krishna, they can come to the level of negating, or trying to negate their material existence. So it's very interesting that you made a little protest of my citing Tolstoy as being an example of a sophisticated ignoramus. Another name was also offered, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, but probably none of you would have felt any angst at his name being cited, because he's French, he's not Russian. Was French. Maybe he's Russian now, maybe he's one of you. Maybe not. I don't know that much about him. I seem to remember he had some familiarity, but that he was a convinced Catholic, and then he decried that. But I'm not very much read in all this. I'm not an expert in the biographies of all the kinds of things. So the fact that, so it said that Tolstoy had some familiarity with the Vedas via a translator who was just translating from a level of mental speculation, it really doesn't put him on the level of Lord Brahma. In the Western world, this Schopenhauer was most famous for being influenced by the German translations of the Upanishads. among Western philosophers. But it really, even though they are such people, they are blessed due to their previous karma with some higher intelligence, considerably higher intelligence than others. And due to some manifestation of piety, some recognition of the value of the Vedic knowledge, even though they receive it in a not very clear form. But at the same time, we should understand that the realizations of such persons is very, very poor in comparison to any one of you who have heard the Vedic knowledge in proper parampara. And if we become particularly inclined to defend Tolstoy because he's Russian and we think we're Russian, then we really have not understood much at all. So this is an example of the cultural baggage or garbage that we carry with us. That we tend to, a very strong tendency to identify ourselves with the particular situation in which we have been raised in this one particular life. We think, well, if everyone says so, it must be right. If all the people around us believe that the real goal of life is to be a good enjoyer of this world, then, well, it must be right. And even though we take to Krishna consciousness, we still feel this attraction and attachment to that way of thinking. That's why it is essential to hear such topics that will cut such attachments. For without cutting such attachments, we will remain attached. Just like the boat which is tied up to the shore, you can go on rowing and rowing and rowing and rowing, but for all your effort you won't go anywhere. Therefore we can go on hearing and chanting and dancing and taking prasadam and saying Jai Srila Prabhupada, but unless we cut those attachments, we're going to remain more or less where we are. When we talk about cutting, it sounds painful. It can be. Tatatu sangam utsraja satsu sajjeta buddhiman santa evasyam chindanti manovya sangam uktibihi. We should, this is the version of Krishna, we should give up all bad association and associate with devotees.
И необходимо общаться с преданными.
Who they will cut our mental attachments by their words. Bhakti Saraswati Thakur therefore gave a definition of the word sadhu as one who cuts. He gave the analogy, just like the animal is killed in a sacrifice, so the sadhu stands there with the chopper to chop our attachments to pieces. So tapasya that Brahma undertook, that can be quite painful. But maybe even more painful, mentally painful, is cutting our attachments. It may seem horrible to us that what horrible words. Why are you against Tolstoy? And we're not against Tolstoy, but we're against the foolishness by which one elevates Tolstoy to a position which he's not in because we think he's Russian and I'm Russian. So, okay, after. So, first understanding that sense gratification is not the purpose of human life. And as long as we're tied up to the shore of sense gratification, we can go on with our hearing and chanting, but we won't get the proper result. We should consider very carefully the import of the Bahu Janma Kore Jadi Shavan Kirtan Tabutana Pai Krishna Paditanadan. That we can go on hearing and chanting for many lives and not get the result of love of Krishna. It's not automatic. So this reading of the Srimad Bhagavatam, discussing the Srimad Bhagavatam, helps to train our intelligence so that we can understand what we're actually supposed to be doing. As Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport later in this chapter, if someone sincerely wants to see the Lord and at the same time wants to enjoy this material world, he is to be considered a fool only. And with those words I'll finish and I'll continue this topic tomorrow. Yeah, you wanted to say something? Yeah, okay, but you can say, but at the same time you have to remember that our real subject is Krishna. We may use different persons as examples of what we should be doing, such as Brahma, and what we should not be doing. And although Tolstoy may have had some admirable qualities, on the whole he's more an example of what we should not be doing rather than what we should be doing.
И
So there's no real need to get into an elaborate analysis of him. Whatever glimpse of a proper direction he may have got in a overall bewildered life, congratulations to him for that. See, sometimes we cite people, like in America there's Emerson and Thoreau, they praise the Bhagavad Gita. So we do that maybe just to make some impression in the minds of materialistic people who respect such people as Emerson and so on, or in Tolstoy in Russia. But these are not the Mahajans who we have to follow. In Bengal, many people are very appreciative of Rabindranath Tagore or Ravi Tagore. And sometimes they say, well, he also made poems about Krishna. Yeah, less than 1%. He's not a Vaishnava. But he was raised in a culture in which Vaishnavism was prominent and he had some inclination somewhere there. So let us clearly understand who are the Mahajans we should follow. Having said that, do you still want to make a case for Tolstoy? This is not the International Society for bashing Tolstoy. It's the International Society for bashing everyone who's not Krishna conscious. So sometimes we cite prominent examples of non-devotees who are highly bashable. We don't only say that Tolstoy is a fool, we say everyone's a fool unless they're actually in Krishna consciousness. Namam Dushvajano Murha Prapadyante Naratamaha Maya Paritagyana Asuram Bhavamashita. Anyone, Krishna says, who does not surrender to me is a rascal. They may be a fool rascal, or a lowest of mankind rascal, or an apparently intelligent rascal, or just a straightforward out-and-out rascal. But they're all rascals. Some who still want to flog a dead horse, if they say flog a dead horse. Means to try. You're trying to. You have a similar saying?
No.
There must be a similar saying.
Подгонять ее.
I guess the modern equivalent would be to try and push start a car that has no petrol in it. Okay, I think we'll finish there because it's time for the